The Group of Five last week, and UConn Husky general manager Eddie Hernan to the Big 12 and the Arizona Wildcats. Gaizka Crowley joins us today to give the Power 4 perspective on the transfer portal, Big 12 football, some Wildcat draft prospects, and more here on Scouting the League. Another week and another general manager. Excited to get to our conversation with Gaizka Crowley. But first, Scouts, head over, sign up for the exclusive Scouts only group at thescoutingcommunity.com. Really excited about the feedback I've gotten so far, the mentors we have signed up, the teachers we have ready to help with development, and so much more. The more Scouts we have as part of the scouting community, the more we will be able to do. Yes, it will always remain anonymous and always protect Scouts. Go get signed up today and help us move the scouting world forward. And for aspiring Scouts, head to thescoutingcommunity.com. Scroll down just a little ways. Sign up for the Aspiring Scout Community. Networking, development, access to mentorship with NFL Scouts, all going to be a part of what you can get. Head to thescoutingcommunity.com today. When you're done with that, like, subscribe, and share wherever you are watching and listening, whether that is on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Megaphone, or over at our home at Fans First Sports Network. Give us a 5-star review, like, subscribe, and most importantly, share this with a friend. Excited about all we have coming up and what will be continuing to be brought to you in the future. Joined as always by Neil Stratton, the co-host, the man that is Inside the League. He is at Inside the League on X, InsideTheLeague.com. Make sure you check out his blog at SucceedInFootball.com. Excited to talk Neil's new book coming up later this month prior to the draft, about that draft. Going to be really fun conversation, really fun insight. I'd imagine a good story or two will be told as well. I am Rodrik David, former NFL scout, spent 6 seasons with the Atlanta Falcons as a scouting assistant, pro scout, and Midwest area scout. 1 season prior to that with the Tennessee Titans. Now doing all I can to educate aspiring scouts, agents, and anyone else in the football world about what scouts actually do. I am ready to get to the draft, so all the BS and everything else that is thrown up against a wall finally goes away. 32 teams will get better despite what anybody else out there says. So as we wait for that, in the meantime, we will keep plugging away. Today's guest, Gaizka Crowley, named the general manager of the Arizona Wildcats in 2024 after spending a year in that GM role at Western Michigan. Prior to that, stints with UNLV, XOs, and Southern Illinois, all after his time at Florida State. Well, Gaizka, welcome to Scouting the League.
I appreciate you guys having me. Really enjoy the show and excited to talk for the next hour or so.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're here, buddy.
It is a busy time of the year. Spring football, spring transfer portal. Waiting for the NCAA to make a decision. We will all go gray as that's happening. But before we get into all the good stuff, the stuff people want to hear, give us a background on, again, a little more comprehensive journey on how you got to Arizona football to be the GM, kind of your football background and everything.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit of a different one. It's something I tell, when I'm chatting with young people that want to kind of get into this thing. I say, ultimately, everybody has their own journey, and you kind of have to own yours. So for me, I was never a student assistant. I was never a graduate assistant. I never worked in a recruiting office. Back, I'm old, so I graduated high school in 2005. So if you wanted to work in college football, you coached. That was kind of the deal. So I got my degree from Florida State in social studies education, and I started as a high school coach, and that was kind of where I thought my path would be. Was a high school coach in Florida at a really successful program, and I said, hey, man, this is a great spot for me to become a GA or become a small college coach, kind of figuring this thing out, and it never really happened. Obviously, when you're young, you want everything to happen yesterday. I was really lucky to be with a guy named Wade Rawlinson. He was an OG kind of high school coach, and he started a company back in the day. This is pre-Huddle, right? So this is DVD and even tapes for him, and it was called High Tech Video. And what he would do is he would coach during the day, he would teach during the day, he would coach, and then in the spring and the summer, he'd drive around Florida and Georgia, and he'd dub VHS tapes, and he would package them and say, hey, here are the best 25 running backs in Florida. And he was kind of Huddle before really Huddle existed. So long story short, he said, hey, man, I can't pay you anything, but if you want to help out, I can kind of help introduce you to some college guys, because he kind of knew that was kind of my goal. And so I helped out Wade and did cut-ups and evaluations and really fell in love with scouting and recruiting and team building, more so than the coaching. Again, I still loved it, but ultimately I just wanted to work in college football. Like I love Saturdays. I love the whole thing behind it. So that company was bought by a company called XOs Digital, which is now Catapult. So I worked for them full time in Chicago, again doing recruiting and scouting. And in the back of my mind, it was always, what's the avenue to get into college? That was kind of my thought. Got really, really lucky. A guy named Kelvin Bell, who's the D-line coach at Iowa, he and I struck up a friendship. And one day he called me and said, hey, man, there's a recruiting job open. Would you be interested? And my first words to him were, absolutely, tell him I'll take the job. Like, I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what it paid. I didn't know what the title was. And luckily it was at Southern Illinois University for Nick Hill, who's still the head coach there. And that was kind of my first crack into college football. I thought I knew how it was done, and I thought I had all the answers, and I found out quickly I did not. So it was a little bit of a trial by fire, but it was incredible. Coach Hill is still a friend, and it was not a better place for me to start in this industry, and I've kind of worked my way up and been really successful and been really happy to be able to work with awesome head coaches and awesome assistant coaches that have really taught me a lot. So it's a little bit of a different path, but I like to own it as best I can, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Southern Illinois was always a fun stop on the Midwest tour for Midwest scouts, and I remember some fun players, and they were always those guys that the directional Illinois schools were the guys that more often than not were day 3 stand on the table guys, and guys that you loved everything about them. And again, I believe it was Coach Hill that was there, and was a fantastic visit, and again, a good spot there. So you go from Southern Illinois then to did you get to Western Michigan from there?
It was UNLV, yeah, with
UNLV first. Good. So talk to me about going from, again, you're getting some action in, you're living that life in the Midwest to UNLV.
Yeah, so it really was. It was kind of a crazy situation. It was during COVID, so Coach Arroyo got the job like December, January of 2020, and I joked with my wife at the time. I think I was the only person stupid enough to move across the country during COVID. So I lived in a hotel for 2 weeks in Las Vegas and working there, and Coach Arroyo was great for my development. He's still a friend, still someone I talk to a lot. He's at the school up north right now, so that's always a little bit of a back and forth. But he was great for me in the attention to detail and the organization and just the overall intensity it took, because he had been at some really good spots, Oklahoma State, Oregon. He coached in the NFL as well, been around some really good coaches from the recruiting perspective, not necessarily on the field. So he was great for my development. I spent 3 years there, and I think we did really, really good work. I was proud of the guys we signed, the guys we recruited. Obviously wanted to win more games ultimately, but that was a huge step for me in realizing, hey, okay, what does a big-time personnel department, recruiting office look like? So Coach Arroyo was awesome for my development. Really, really appreciative of him.
You've talked a lot about development already, Gaizka, and we've known each other for a better part of 10 years, and tracking your rise has been really impressive to me and kind of fun. But it all started out, you said, you were volunteering. How long were you volunteering, and is volunteering still something you see as an essential part of working in football? When you talk to someone who says, hey, Gaizka, how do I break into the game? Is part of your pitch, listen, you're going to have to work somewhere probably for nothing or for very minimal, just starting out?
I think so. To me, what I always tell young people is, at the end of the day, you have to provide value, right? I can send my resume to as many people as I want, even as a GM or whatever my title is. At the end of the day, if I can provide you value, whether that be finding you players, connecting you with coaches, whatever that is, and that's you have to find out what your niche is. If I can provide you value, and then that's what I felt like I did with Kelvin Bell at Iowa. So Kelvin, incredible recruiter, incredible coach. he would recruit Detroit and Indianapolis and Chicago. So what I used to do is I'd go to these camps and these combines, and I would take photos and I'd send him videos. And I was trying to say, hey man, like you know, this might be a kid you're not in on, or this might be a young guy. And I was able to send that stuff to Coach Bell. I was able to provide him value, not just here's my resume, you know, hopefully one day you'll hire me. And I feel like I tried to play the long game, and I tried to create a genuine relationship with these folks. And then with Kelvin, obviously, you know, I always joke every time I see him that, you know, he kicked off my career, you know. So yeah, and sometimes that value is in a volunteer role. Sometimes that value is as a high school coach, or, you know, now the Twitter kind of third party, non-associated with the team world is huge. Podcasts like this, there's lots of guys out there that have kind of started that way. But that's my biggest thing, Neil, is providing value. How do you do that? And then to me, that's your edge. Like that's the way you can kick a door in that may be closed other ways. And sometimes, you know, as a volunteer, we have a good crew of young student assistants here at the U of A. You know, one got a job at UCF, one got a job at Sam Houston State, one just got a job at Idaho. So really proud of those young people. And, you know, I tell them all the time, guys, I wish I could pay you $1 million, but just that's sometimes where we all have our starting point. And I tell them, like I said earlier, you got to own your path. You got to own that, and then be excited and proud of whatever that is.
So critical what you said. And I hope that the people that are trying to break in the game really focus on the last 2 or 3 minutes of this podcast, because providing value is absolutely essential. It's much more than just firing off resumes and, you know, putting your draft takes out on Twitter. Now, another thing that you have discussed that I've really keyed in on, every stop that you've made, you've discussed someone that was critical to that stop and helped you make that. You wouldn't be where you are now, guys, certainly as quickly as you've made it, if you didn't have a thriving network and you didn't know how to build those relationships. Was that something that was intentional for you, or was it something you kind of figured out along the way? Oh, wow, look how I've been able to make progress. Maybe it's because of the people I've been able to befriend and provide value to.
And honestly, it's funny you say, like, I remember going to AFCA as a high school coach, right, backpack full of resumes. I didn't know anyone. Like, literally, I would stand in the lobby and I did not know one person. And it's funny, that's what I tell my young people. It's like, you got to do a great job. People call it networking, you know, sometimes that can be, but what I tell them is, look, don't network with someone so that they can do something for you. To me, that's not what it's about. Like, I'm not going to, Neil and I, our relationship didn't start so that you could provide me something or I could provide, like, it wasn't like that. So I tell them, hey, create a genuine relationship. You probably have similar problems. You probably have similar successes. And then you grow with those people. So whether you're a student assistant, a GA, scouting assistant, you know, obviously you guys know the NFL world. To me, that's what's really important. And then I just try to treat people the right way. Like, it's super old school, but to me, you know, I was the guy that sent all the mail. I was the guy that drove to schools unannounced, and hopefully I could talk to the secretary, right? So to me, I want to treat everybody I can like that old cliche, right? Treat the janitor like you treat the owner, that kind of concept. I really believe in that. And is that karma, or is that the universe? You know, maybe not. But that's how I do it. That's what has worked for me. And at the end of the day, as you guys know, this thing's a grind, and I want to work with people that I care about, and I want to work with people that take care of me and my family, like Coach Brennan here, the head coach at U of A. Like, those are the people that I want to work with, not just the best scout or just not the best recruiting person. You know, that's kind of what we look for.
Yeah.
Now, guys, in your days in Vegas, correct me if I'm wrong, you may have had this 2 years, maybe one. I know I only attended one. But you basically had a personnel symposium, kind of a West Coast-based one. Was that 1 year or 2 years?
We did it for two, yeah. We did it for two.
Okay, all right. So that was you and Lucas, more or less, putting it together. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. What was the thinking behind that? And do you feel like maybe West Coast schools, people like yourself, were getting overlooked because there is maybe more of an East Coast bias to college football these days? Yeah,
to tell a little bit of the story is, so Lucas was the DPP at Colorado State at the time. Been at UCLA, you know, kind of like you said, a West Coast guy. And what happened was, you know, everyone was doing those COVID Zooms, right? And doing kind of connecting and networking. So Vegas was one of the first spots to open up after the pandemic. And I had a couple people reach out to, like, have you ever thought about, you know, like, getting some people together? And I'm like, okay, well, like, Vegas was open at the time. You know, good airport, easy to get to. And I was like, hey, maybe we'd have like 10 or 15 people show up, get some pizzas, talk ball, something like that. I think the first one was in the like the mid 60s, and which was way more than we ever thought. And then year 2, I think we were in like the high hundreds, like 170, 180. And it was completely free. There was no cost because we wanted to make sure young people could attend. And what we did is we reached out to some awesome kind of recruiting services and vendors, so they kind of supported it. And it was a fun deal. Like I said, it was 2 years. Then I transitioned to Western Michigan. Lucas transitioned out of football, but it was a fun time of, like you said, just connecting people. And there's a lot of people at that event that are either just got a college job or still in college. So it was fun. Like you said, it was something a little different, kind of just trying to connect people and learn and better yourself. And a trip to Vegas is not usually hard to convince people. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Jim Abrams spoke that year, the year that I attended. I don't know if that was year 1 or year 2. At the time, he was still with the Raiders. He may have, I don't know if that benefited him in moving over to the to the Dolphins or not, but a lot of people made connections there, and I thought it was a really positive environment, and I was really pleased with how y'all ran it, especially given that you didn't have unlimited resources and those kinds of things. It was very professionally run. But do you think that there's kind of maybe a disconnect between an East Coast guy who's had most of his career on the East Coast, and then maybe yourself who's been at UNLV, now U of A, obviously? Is it easy to kind of pull the two coasts together, or and what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that so I'm from Florida originally, went to Florida State, spent time in the Midwest on the West Coast. So like you said, I've been a little bit of everywhere. What I pride myself in, and I think is really interesting, is that like you do have to recruit the coast differently. Like the West Coast culture, LDS culture, Polynesian culture is way different than Southern culture, is way different than Midwestern culture. So I feel like it's an advantage for me, especially in the transfer portal world, right? Because you may call a kid from the South, you may call a kid from the Midwest or Texas, but I think there is, I think it's a little bit. I don't think it's anyone's fault per se. Just the volume of schools in the South and the Midwest are tighter, right? It's more dense. I think there's probably a stronger student workforce at those schools than on some on the West Coast. So there is, but then it goes back to the old line, right? Nobody cares, work harder, right? Like if you're a West Coast guy and you look to the East Coast, well then you got to find your edge. What can you do? Maybe it's like, hey, I'm going to lean into the California quarterback 7-on-7 culture, and that's going to be my niche. Or maybe it's something else. You just kind of have to find your edge. But there's definitely huge differences for sure, obviously, between the leagues, between the state of football, and obviously how you recruit the kids.
Mm-hmm. Now, guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Were you GM at UNLV?
I was started as the DPP and then transitioned to chief of staff, so a little bit of a different role.
Okay. And were you GM at Western Michigan?
I was, yep.
Okay. You were a GM before it was cool to be a GM.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I've always really been impressed by, was kind of how you were kind of maybe it wasn't you per se that was doing the early adopting, but you certainly were serving in that role before it became what it is today. How has that role evolved, Gaizka, and how is it at U of A compared to maybe how it was at Western Michigan? Where do you see it going? Because it's become such a prominent role. Lots and lots of people making that transition. I'm sure there are NFL scouts listening to this saying, I'd like to get into a role like that. Tell me about kind of the whole transition from where it was, where you first got that role, to where it is today, and where you maybe see it going.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, obviously, with handful of years back with the start of NIL and then collectives, and then as we transition into rev share. I think the biggest thing, talking to NFL guys or college guys, certainly you've been lucky enough to visit with some executives at the NFL level too, is if you're going to be in this role, you just can't be a scout, right? You can't just be an evaluator. You can't just be a recruiter. And in my experience, and something that I like to lean on is the idea of being a manager. Right, like you've got to be connected to the creative department. You have to be connected to operations. You have to be connected, obviously, to the recruiting ops and then the scouting. Like my what I love to do, what I got my name in this industry is scouting and recruiting. Right, it's talent identification and then the recruitment of that talent. But so I think the biggest thing for me is making sure I'm still never forgetting that I am a manager and I am responsible for the people underneath me, their development, their goals, and their growth. So that's something I don't want people to lose is like, like with the titles and you see different people getting hired, which I think is fantastic, and the salaries, which again is wonderful for this industry, but to never forget, your job is to do your best to be the head coach of really your area, right? And that's something I take a lot of pride in. So there's a lot of professional development, personal development. And then I joke a lot of times for me, like when I watch tape is super late at night or super early in the morning, because during the day it's, we got this kid on campus, or I've got to meet with so-and-so for the spring game, or, those kind of things. But I'm really excited about where the industry is going. Obviously, you've seen some, big names from the NFL coming down, which I think is fantastic, to better learn the way that those guys have done it at the highest level, which is great. Obviously, I think more jobs, better salaries, better contracts for support staff people is critical, because everyone talks about the buyouts of the head coaches, but nobody talks about, the third recruiting guy who just got hired. And if there's a transition, what happens to his life? He doesn't have a buyout. He doesn't have a 4-year deal. So I'm super passionate about just the growth of that side of the industry. I think is really important. But then it's our job, right, to deliver. We can't have these big titles or salaries and then not be working as well as the coaches. I view myself, hopefully, and I hope my staff does too, of like, I'm one of the guys. Like I'm one of the people that help this thing. I'm not just a recruiting guy, right, in quotation marks. So I know there's a lot there, but definitely something I'm really excited about. And it's still evolving. What does a college GM look like? That answer would have been different 18 months ago, and it's probably going to be different 18 months from now.
Yeah. Guys, you talked about the support staff, and again, the role as it's evolving. Again, I think just about anybody in the football world, you hear GM, you think one of 32, right? You think NFL franchises, and as every program at the college level is now more or less hiring a GM, the thought is that, hey, the scouting staff, your front office staff, quote unquote, is going to trickle its way down. Do you see that? Have you guys started to think about that in terms of, hey, if we're going to NFL junior model with front office, with GMs, with all that, we're going to build out more of a scouting and evaluation staff, and again, make it look like that NFL model on the GM and front office side?
I think it has to, right? And it's really a volume game, right? 15 years ago when you were signing 25 prospects, and there was no transfer portal and only one signing day, just the volume in the landscape was different. I think now with 2 portals, obviously, the portal, when the portal window opens again, I'm sure there'll be, they send those tweets out, right? Hey, broken record for first day. So I think we talk about it all the time. Obviously, prospect identification, prospect evaluation, and then the recruitment of the prospect. And I tell my young people, I say, hey guys, we don't draft players, we recruit them. So you can't just lock yourself in a room and watch tape, and then like you gotta call these guys. You got to get on the phones. You got to talk to their people, high school coaches, families. You got to be great in person when they're here. So a little bit different. I've never worked in the NFL, but I would imagine that's a little bit different. I know they do the 30 visits and things like that. But it's ever changing and it's moving. I think having more evaluators I think is going to be important. But then like you mentioned on the cap side, how to kind of manage some of these things financially, I think is going to move forward. And I'm going to give you a secret, and I've told some people this, is if I was, and I do it, and I don't mind sharing, I would call every FCS and Division II head coach that's out there. I mean, those guys have been managing a salary cap forever. Partial scholarship, who gets what, how do you break your money into each position room? I mean, being an FCS guy, I call those guys all the time, and I think that's been really helpful for us. Those are the founders of this thing at the collegiate level, where everyone's like, oh, we need the NFL guys to balance the cap. It's like, not me. I'm calling the D2 head coach, and I'm trying to figure out how that guy's, he's won 5 national championships. Obviously, he's figured this thing out. So it's exciting. I really enjoy, the evolution of it, and I'm excited the way the industry's going. But it's like that the old adage, right? Like nothing's new in the universe. Like someone's been doing this before. You just got to find who that person is.
Yeah.
In the old days, I worked with a search firm, and we worked with smaller schools. And if you want to hear a football coach sound like an accountant, talk to a D2 coach.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about putting up Pell Grants and half scholarships and all those kind of things. You're right on the money there. Now, speaking of money, guys, I think there's still an impression. It's very sexy to talk about player evaluation, and when we think of GMs, certainly at the NFL level, we're thinking about the draft and all those kind of things. What percentage of your job now is strictly financial, and in 5 years, what do you think that ratio is going to be? Because if you don't see the direction that everything's going, you don't see the value of money in the game, you've got blinders on. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it changes what part of the year you're in, right? Obviously, when you're in a heavy, portal season, some of those conversations happen, more often. Obviously, if you're in the dead of the summer, a little bit less. But it's going to be a critical aspect, and again, I know, listening to you guys for a while, you've got so many conversations with NFL guys, whether that be on the cap side or the scouting side. But that really is, I think it's important for us to be well versed. Right, I can't just be a phenomenal scout, like I said earlier, because when I meet with my AD or meet with my head coach, I've got to be dialed into the roster management, the cap management, all those kind of things. So you ultimately got to find your sweet spot, and you got to lean into what that is. But I feel like if you're going to be in some of these senior positions, whatever you want to call them, having a well versed skill set in it is going to be really, really important. And I know Coach Saban said it on one of the I think it was like the College Game Day or whatever. He said, like, basically he was like, doesn't matter how much money you have, if you give it to the wrong player, it doesn't really matter, right? So I do think that's really important. At the end of the day, making sure that the resources, no different than it's always been. You want to make sure resources are allocated to your best players and then your best people. So that's kind of how we look at it. And so to answer your question, 5 years from now, man, I think it's probably going to be even more than it is right now. But then that's where we have to carve out the time that, hey, if you're going to be a scout, you still got to burn the midnight oil and make sure the fake tape gets watched. Because if I'm going to have a conversation with my coaches or my head coach, I want to make sure they know that I'm in the foxhole with them. Not just the drive by at practice of what I think, but I'm in there evaluating the tape just like those guys are.
Yeah. Guys, could we talk to Eddie Hernan over at UConn last week? Again, a good, with Coach Moore running it, they have been a little bit ahead of the curve. They're a good program, but they're a Group of 5 school. They are going to attack the portal both in December, January, and now coming up here in about a week in a different way that Arizona, a power school, a school that's going to have maybe a top 5 draft pick, maybe a couple first rounders, with the old linemen. As you guys get ready for this spring portal, talk about your approach, the differences in approach between December and now, and kind of how you guys are viewing it as a program that can go out and again, you can put it on paper what our players do here when they're wearing the A on the helmet, and how you guys will attack it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, the December window's hopefully a little different because it's just a higher volume, right? You've got your seniors moving on, like you said. We'll have a handful or a couple draft picks, I think. Hopefully, 3 or 4. Where in the spring, what you'd really like to do is after spring practice, you're really hoping to just kind of use it as a patchwork. You're really saying, okay, maybe there was an injury. This kid didn't develop the way we thought, and that's the hope. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but the thought process is I want to try to get my main guys in for January, get them through winter conditioning, have them buy into the culture through spring practice, and now you've evaluated the spring roster so that when you flip over to the portal window here in a couple weeks, you can, like I said, use it more as patchwork. Now, that's the plan. Now, that's the thing with this is you just never know. So making sure for us, like, tracking what our level of risk is at certain positions with certain players. Do we, if we feel like they may leave, and then what is our game plan if they do? What type of player are we looking for in that secondary portal window is really critical. And you always have your fingers crossed on some of that stuff. But for Coach Brennan, a lot of his philosophy is he wants to coach guys that want to be here in Tucson, right? Like, we're not begging guys to play. So if there's guys that want to go somewhere else and they feel like there's a better fit for them, then God bless them, and we wish them the best. And we're going to find the guys that want to be here at the U of A. And we feel like for us, our culture, our town, that's our recipe.
Yeah. One of the more unsung things with the portal, both in December and coming up here in April, that goes unnoticed is kind of the for a school like you guys, the key backup that thinks he's a starter, he comes out of spring practices seeing that hey, I'm just going to be a rotational guy. I've got eligibility left. From the NFL standpoint, that guy should stay at Arizona. He should develop, buy his time, and then again in 2027 maybe a draft pick. But that guy, the thinking now for those guys is, no, I'm going to go find a back end Power 5 or a good group of 5 school, and I want to go be the guy there. It hurts development. Again, it's another new playbook, another new stop. Again, a lot of variables. How are you guys selling? Stay here, develop. We've got resources. Again, point to the draft picks, point to the history, all those kinds of things. How hard a battle is that to recruit those players that have, again, been drilled in by whoever that, hey, you got to go find greener grass somewhere?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us when we talk about development too, obviously when the kid's scoring touchdowns or sacking the quarterback, that's the easiest way, right? But so I think for us, like if he's a guy that may not have played or hasn't played at all, right, is tracking, okay, how are you doing in the weight room? Where are you at with your nutrition? Maybe socially and academically, when we say development, there's development in those categories too. So if you have a kid who's never really played, what we try to do is we try to package those things and we say, hey, look at where your strength numbers have been. Look at where your nutrition numbers, look at your GPA, look at your community service. Like, you are being developed in a holistic way. And then what we do is we'll flip on some of the tape, right, and say, hey, this is last spring versus 2 springs ago. This is where, you are getting better. Like, watch yourself on tape. So I think that's a lot of it, showing them that development is happening, even though it may not be on the field. But at the same time, too, like, guys, if that's the decision they've made, and they're good kids and they do things the right way, we'll give them our blessing and understanding that, like you said, they have limited time. But that's how we try to do it. We try to show them that development is kind of all over holistically. And then you guys know in this game, I mean, especially with the roster limits coming up, everyone's been talking about depth. I mean, you play 8 O linemen, you play 9 D linemen, you play 8 wideouts. So then it's showing them those opportunities too of maybe the kid last year who was lower on the depth chart that looked up and ended up starting 7 games. And then you try to put your best foot forward. And ultimately though, like, we want to make sure that take care of the kid, and that's what really is important to us.
Yeah.
What about when they approach you in season? And I don't know how much of that you've seen, guys, but we're hearing stories about players that maybe go from a backup role to a starting role, and suddenly they think they're worth more. But maybe they are. How do you handle that? Is that something you've been seeing a lot? And how is that as a dilemma for someone like yourself?
Yeah, we honestly haven't had a ton of that. I know I've heard certain things about that at other schools, and obviously, each school is going to have their own process, for that. Luckily for us, we really haven't. Even with those couple draft pick guys, people asked about, are they going to opt out? Are they going to sit out? And both our guys were fantastic, Jonah and T-Mac, in that way. So not something we have really taken on, but we always tell people, look, we want to take care of our kids. Like, we want to take care of them, and we want them to have the best collegiate experience they have. We want to make sure they can maximize their earning potential in NIL and all those things. So we're supportive of that, and Coach Brennan is supportive of that, and in any way we can. But yeah, not something that we dealt a ton with, in a season or in spring practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk
Tell
about
us a little bit about give us your elevator speech for Jonah and for Tet. I mean, obviously
it's T-Mac now. It's T-Mac. That's a thing. It's okay.
Okay,
it's okay.
But I know you've seen him behind the scenes, unlike some like Rodrik and me and a lot of the draft fans out there. What makes them competitors? What makes them special in addition to what they do between the lines?
Yeah, I think for T-Mac first, I think the biggest thing for him, obviously, he's been super highly recruited kid. He comes from a great family. He comes from a hardworking family. They're good people. Mom and dad are really good. They come to practice. They're around the team. He's a kid that during the recruitment process, he came to the U of A obviously with Coach Fish, but a lot of it because of Noah Fafita and his teammates at Servite that signed here. So he's a really, really loyal kid. Obviously, I'm sure his phone was ringing off the hook at the end of every season as far as going somewhere else. But he's really committed to Tucson and really committed to U of A and his teammates, and then committed to us with Coach Brennan getting here last January. Had the opportunity to leave and didn't. So I think for him, just that loyalty is big, and obviously the tape is the tape. He's got 3 years of real production. I think with T-Mac, though, his best football is way ahead of him. He's a true junior. He's only 21 years old. Obviously, you've seen all the highlights and those kind of things. But this is a kid that's super competitive. He was an elite volleyball player out of high school. And I just think his best football is ahead of him for sure as he continues to mature and grow. No issues off the field at all. Was a model citizen for us. So for T-Mac, really, really excited about where he ends up. And then Jonah's the offensive lineman. The story I tell about Jonah too is he's a kid that has played right tackle, most of his career here for us because of need. In game, we had our left tackle go down. He moved from right tackle to left tackle in game. Never had taken a snap there. Hadn't taken a pass set there. We joked that he took a TV timeout to figure out how to pass that from the left side. And this is a kid that had NFL scouts here every day. He had obviously a really bright future, and I think a lot of other players might have said, "Hey guys, I'm good. Like I'm gonna keep doing." But he moved right over, and so he bounced between right and left. Obviously, probably more of a guard. That's kind of where his combine work was and some of the Senior Bowl work. But was a team captain for us, a great culture piece. A lot of those guys I like to judge in recruiting, right? When I have recruits come in and we say, "Hey, there's 4 or 5 guys. Can you come out, hang out with them, come to lunch?" Like Jonah was one of those guys that would want to come back. Another kid that had lots of options to go other places, but was super loyal to us. Young guy, he's quiet, but he has a great personality. I went to the Combine with Coach Brennan in the Senior Bowl, and I've heard that he just knocked out the NFL interviews. The more you get to know Jonah, the more you're going to fall in love with him. I think that he's going to play for a really, really long time. He was in the weight room this morning with Jordan Morgan, the draft pick from the Packers last year. So we think the world of those two, and we're really, really excited. And it's for the University of Arizona to potentially have 2 first-round draft picks, I think for the first time since 1990, is a great day. Not even for those 2 kids and their families, but the U of A as a whole.
Yeah, no question. Who else? Those are the 2 big names. Obviously, for T-Mac, again, maybe if you want to call him the best pure wide receiver in the group, again, that would be the argument I'd be making. Who else are you excited about getting their shot in the NFL off this year's team?
Yeah, I think the couple other guys is Tyler Loop is our kicker. He had a combine invite. He did really, really well. Led the country in touchback percentage. Hit one from 62 in game this year. He's got a real leg. He's played a lot of football here. He's been in a lot of different situations. So I think Tyler Loop's a guy that's got a shot. Obviously kickers and draft picks were always a little bit unique. And then the other one is Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. Goes by Bill. He's the running back. Had a monster pro day. We do the Big 12 pro days and tested really, really well. He's a kid that's got a lot of good football ahead of him. He's from Montgomery, Alabama originally. He's a super humble kid. Very family oriented, but he's another one that I think if a team sinks their teeth into him and builds him up, he's got a shot to get drafted from guys that I've talked to. So potentially, 4 draft picks, and then you got some other guys. Aquali Conley is a running back that was a really, really good college player that he's going to make a camp, and he's going to, it's going to be up to him from there. That's kind of the old adage, right? Like you get the locker and the pair of shorts, and the rest is kind of up to you. But Q's awesome, great kid, played really well for us last year. So we're excited. We're really excited about this group.
Yeah,
I didn't get to talk to you about this beforehand. Guys, I don't know if you attended the Big 12 Pro Day. I don't know if you went to Frisco or not. What's been your experience there? Has it been a positive thing? Has it been helpful to all the U of A players? Have you seen maybe some opportunities kind of go by the boards, just given the reality of it being a TV event and all those kind of things? I mean, what's your general perception there?
Yeah, I did, Neil. I was able to spend a couple of days down there. I think definitely a unique idea. Excuse me. Definitely something outside the box that I think the Big 12 was trying to do, which was obviously in this day and age, we're always trying to do something a little different. So I thought that was cool. I think being able to work out in the Star was a unique experience for a lot of kids. So they enjoyed that. So there were a lot of positives, but just like anything, there's always, both sides of the coin. I do think that more opportunities for the guy to have workouts here on campus is always important, right? So that they can run on their turf and they can be in their building. I think that is an important. So it was interesting. It was the first time we'd done it. It was year 2 for the Big 12, but first for the U of A. So it was an interesting event. I think really enjoyed. Like I said, the facility was first class and that was fun. But continuing to evolve and trying to find a way to make it the best opportunity for the players. Obviously there were a ton of NFL teams there to evaluate. But we'll see. We definitely want to make sure that. We're good partners with the Big 12, obviously, but then still taking care of our guys too. Which having them maybe another opportunity to run and jump on campus could be beneficial for those guys as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you continue to get the calls from maybe like the NAU players and that kind of stuff that don't really get the Big 12 conference idea and are hoping they can come in and work out with y'all? And if so, what do you tell those guys? It's got to be difficult to explain to them that's just not something that's an avenue for them anymore.
Yeah, that is. So we had a couple kids reach out. That is a great point. Some of those, lower level schools or smaller schools, if you will, but they got really good players. Again, that's where I started. So that was unfortunately, because we were in Frisco, we didn't have anything on campus. That was a consequence of the event, and that is something that you like to bring in a couple of those guys or some of those local ones that might be from Arizona. But that's a great point. That's something that. Wasn't able to be done, and I think that's probably, as the Big 12 looks at it and we look at it of trying to make sure we take care of those kids too, because it's all, just like us, we want to give them as many opportunities as we can, for our players and everybody really.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that we maybe put the cart before the horse a little bit. We talked about Big 12 Pro Day. What about the Big 12 in general? I know this is your first year at U of A, so maybe you don't have as much to compare it to, but going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 has got to be a pretty sea change in the way things work, from what goes on in the game to the way things are organized, what have you. What have been the pluses, what have been the minuses, and do you feel like y'all made a pretty smooth transition there?
Yeah, that's a great point. We talk a lot about it, with Coach Brennan and even in recruiting, right? So like to kind of some of the stuff. So for us, like our footprint has kind of moved east some, right? Obviously, now being in the Big 12, Houston and Dallas, San Antonio, Austin are huge priorities for us. We're always going to be based on the West Coast and Arizona and California, obviously. But it's been fun. We signed a bunch of kids in the 25 class from Texas, so that's been awesome. I think a big change is the environments, right? The Iowa States and the Kansas States and the Kansas and the Baylors and the TCUs. Those environments are real environments where maybe traditionally in the Pac-12 maybe not less attended. So that that's definitely an adjustment for the West Coast teams kind of moving to the Big 12. But I really like the league. I do. It's a really competitive league. I think there's a lot of balance there. A lot of the coaches are up and coming young coaches they're going to be head coaches or going to be coordinators. So I really enjoy that aspect of it. I know there's a lot of really quality recruiting and scouting people in those buildings. So I love it. It's a little bit, I joke with some people, it's a little bit like the MAC. Like you just never know who's going to win it what year because it is really competitive. I think the Big 12 is a lot like that. Obviously with the other team up north last year having a lot of success. That is a fun part about this league, that you got to be on point every week because of the competitive balance. So it's a fun one. I enjoy it. Obviously year 2 for us coming up, but it's been great for us. In recruiting, and then obviously with the games on Saturdays.
Now you've worked with a number of FBS head coaches. Obviously, you talked about Marcus extensively earlier. What's Coach Brennan like? How is he different from other coaches you've worked with? What are his strengths and weaknesses, or however you want to handicap that? I know you as a GM, you've got to be working very closely with him, so you probably get to see him from all angles. Kind of, what's your impression there?
Yeah, Coach Brennan is he's a little bit of a unique one, right? So he's not a play caller, and he has really started his career. He was a walk-on at UCLA, in my opinion, one of the best receivers coaches in the country. If you look at what he did at San Jose, Oregon State, Cal Poly, even, but because he's not a play caller, he's really focused on the culture and the building, which is unique, right? So being able to focus on that kind of stuff, he is also. He's just a great guy to work for. Everyone talks about that work-life balance. So he's a guy that'll kick you out of your office at the end of the day. he wants you to go home, but he wants you to get fresh, to come back and be able to pour into it again the next day. We talked about it in our staff meeting yesterday that we always talk about our players being at our best, but we don't often talk about our coaches or our staff being at their best. And whether that's, exercising or eating right or sleeping or, these things that us as, scouts, obviously you guys know right better than anybody, that you have to be at your best to perform your best also. So he's always very focused on that. He's focused on, the people, the community. His wife went here. His brother played here. He was a GA here. So he loves the U of A. So it's been really, really fun. I'm obviously humbled and blessed to be here. And he's a unique one, but I think anyone that knows Coach B knows how genuine he is, and he's a ball coach now. He's came up the hard way, high school coach to start his career, he was here under Coach Dick Tomey, one of the legendary coaches here, and he's a great man to work for. I'm really, like I said, I'm really blessed for it, and excited about what he's doing culturally here in year 2.
Now, previous coaches you've worked with, Gaizka, did they also kind of emphasize the work-life balance thing? If they didn't, I presume it probably was took a little getting used to leaving the office when just when there's still daylight out there or whatever. How's that been?
Yeah, he's probably been the more outwardly focused on it, if you will. I have 2 little kids, and early in my career, right, it's about proving yourself and doing this kind of thing. So it's not naturally something that I'm good at per se. But he's but I will say this too. He's the longest tenured head coach that I've worked for. So that may be something, a little bit of that aspect where with Lance Taylor at Western Michigan and Marcus at Arizona or at the UNLV, they were kind of first-time head coaches. So maybe there's a little bit of that there. And at the end of the day, you gotta run your program the way that you have to run it, in whatever way that is. And but I enjoy it though, because it forces you to think about and evaluate your processes and knowing, okay, why am I doing the things the way I'm doing them? Not just because it's how we've always done it, but these are the reasons how it benefits the organization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gaizka. Well, this has been fantastic. Is Arizona gets ready to for spring game, for the rest of spring practices, for summer camps. You're putting a few things out there on Twitter, on X, the football program. Where can people follow you, find more information, and make sure they get you followed?
Yeah, that's the unique thing about having a different name, right? I think I'm the only Gaizka that you'll probably find. So I think it's Gaizka_U of A, I think, and then obviously Arizona football. But any high school coaches in the area, Arizona, West Coast, Texas, we'd love for you to come by for spring ball. We have a 100% open door policy in any meeting or any room in this building. So reach out to me. We'd love to have you. And yeah, we're excited. I appreciate you guys. I'm a weekly or bi-weekly listener, and I appreciate what you guys do with the newsletter and just bringing the community together, like we talked about earlier. And I always tell people, my hope is that, that me 25 years ago or 20 years ago now, if I can do whatever I can to help that guy out or that girl out to kind of get into this thing. So I really appreciate what you all do and really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I will say, in the spirit of just everything, loving of football, your accessibility is something that's always been really impressive to me, and I know that I'm not the only one that's benefited from that. I mean, the symposium you put together a few years back that we discussed already really kind of says a lot about how much you care about the game, and so keep doing that, man. Good on you for that.
Yeah, I'll say my only contention is you called yourself an old man because you graduated high school in 2005, which means that I graduated in 2006. Like, again, I know what one leads to the other, and I just, I refuse to believe that I am an old man, even though my wife and kids would tell me otherwise, yeah. Right?
I mean, you can see the gray in the beard, man. I'm there. Maybe you're 1 year younger, so maybe that's it.
Wait till you get here, guys.
We're both younger than Neil, and we can always take solace in that. And but yeah, fantastic. Again, definitely go out and follow. He is at Gaizka_U of A, the Arizona school that you need to be following in on. And again, wishing you all the success, and we'll definitely look forward to having you back on at some point.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys. Good luck with the draft, and bear down.
Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, From players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file folder storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.